They said Don Vito Corleone ruled through fear, that his power was built on violence, blood, and whispered threats in dark rooms. But those who truly understood him knew something far more dangerous. He ruled through understanding human nature better than anyone else alive. Before the betrayal, before the 15 men crossed the line that could never be uncrossed, there was balance. A fragile balance, maintained not by guns, but by words spoken softly and remembered forever. Don Vito believed that chaos was the language of fools. Order, on the other hand, belonged to men who could wait. In the shadows of New York, rival families watched him closely. They mistook his calm for weakness, his patience for age, his silence for hesitation. They saw an old man surrounded by tradition, convinced that time had slowed him down, and that miscalculation would become their greatest mistake. The rival who set the plan in motion believed that power could be taken in a single decisive strike. He believed loyalty could be bought, fear manufactured, and betrayal orchestrated like a business transaction. 15 men were chosen carefully, soldiers who knew the streets, who understood violence, and who believed that eliminating Don Vito would rewrite the rules forever. What they did not understand was that Don Vito never ruled alone. His true strength was invisible, a network of respect, obligation, and silent debt stretching further than any enemy could imagine. Long before the 15 men were assembled, Don Vito already knew something was wrong, not because someone warned him, but because the world around him changed its tone. He noticed the pauses between words, the way certain conversations ended too quickly, the absence of fear where fear should exist. To Don Vito, these were not coincidences. They were signals. While his enemies planned in secrecy, convinced of their own cleverness, Don Vito continued his routine. He attended weddings. He listened more than he spoke. He granted favors without raising his voice. To the outside world, nothing had changed. To those close to him, everything had. The 15 men moved at night, confident and united by greed and ambition. Each one believed he would be rewarded, remembered, elevated. None of them questioned why the plan seemed too easy, why the path to Don Vito appeared so open. In their arrogance, they assumed that legends eventually grow careless. But Don Vito believed in preparation over reaction. He believed that the man who waits controls the board, while the man who rushes reveals himself. And so he waited, not for the attack, but for the moment when his enemies exposed who they truly were. When the night finally came, it did not unfold as the rival had imagined. The streets were quiet, almost welcoming, too quiet. One by one, the 15 men began to understand that something was wrong. Doors closed where they expected passage. Faces disappeared where allies should have stood. The city itself seemed to turn against them. By dawn, 14 men were gone. No bodies were displayed. No messages were written in blood. No chaos followed. Only one man was allowed to live. He was not spared out of mercy. He was spared because Don Vito understood something his enemies never did. Fear travels further when it has a voice. And this man was chosen to carry a message that could not be ignored. A warning that would echo far beyond that single betrayal. And as the survivor was brought before Don Vito Corleone, trembling and broken, he realized the truth far too late. This was never about punishment. It was about education. Don Vito leaned forward, his voice calm, almost gentle, and prepared to deliver words that would reshape the balance of power forever. Don Vito did not raise his voice. He never needed to. The survivor stood before him, shaking not from pain, but from the unbearable weight of understanding exactly where he was. This was not a room of violence. It was a room of judgment. Don Vito looked at the man as if studying a familiar book, one he had already read many times before. Betrayal, ambition, desperation, none of it surprised him. What interested him was something else entirely. Why this man believed he could walk away from loyalty without consequence. "You were sent," Don Vito said calmly, not as a question, but as a statement. The man nodded, unable to meet his eyes. Don Vito did not ask for names. He already knew them. He did not ask for motives. He understood those better than the men who carried them. What he wanted was acknowledgement, the moment when the survivor fully grasped that his life no longer belonged to him. "You see," Don Vito continued, "there are men who make war because they enjoy noise, and there are men who build empires because they understand silence." The survivor felt the room closing in, not physically, but spiritually. He realized that the 14 men who came with him were not erased in anger. They were removed with precision. Each disappearance was a correction, not a punishment. Don Vito explained nothing further. He didn't need to. Instead, he offered the man water, a gesture that felt more terrifying than cruelty. Compassion, when undeserved, becomes unbearable. "You will return to the one who sent you," Don Vito said. "You will tell him what you saw. You will tell him what you felt. And you will tell him this: I know who he is, and I know what he wants." The message was not a threat. It was a declaration of awareness. The survivor was released before sunrise. No escort, no protection, only the certainty that he was being watched, not by men, but by consequences. Every step away from that house felt heavier than the one before. He understood that survival did not mean freedom. It meant responsibility. When he finally reached his employer, the rival expected bravado, details of resistance, perhaps even excuses. Instead, he saw a man hollowed out by truth. The survivor spoke slowly, choosing each word as if it could cost him his life. "He knew," the man said. "Before we even moved, he knew." The rival laughed at first. Pride demanded disbelief. But as the survivor continued, describing the silence, the absence of chaos, the calm certainty in Don Vito's eyes, that laughter faded. Confidence gave way to unease. "He spared me," the survivor added, "so I could tell you this: you mistook patience for weakness, and you will not get a second warning." The rival dismissed him, but the damage was done. Fear had entered the room, and fear is contagious. The rival began to notice changes he had ignored before. Allies avoided eye contact. Meetings grew shorter. Trust evaporated without explanation. Don Vito had not retaliated publicly. There were no headlines, no police sirens. Yet the rival felt smaller each day, trapped inside a cage built entirely from his own decisions. That was Don Vito's true power. He didn't destroy his enemies immediately. He allowed them to collapse under the weight of their own paranoia. Behind closed doors, Don Vito spoke to his family, not with anger, but with clarity. He reminded them that power must always appear effortless. Violence, when necessary, should feel inevitable, never emotional. The lesson was simple. Men who act out of fear lose control. Men who understand fear command it. And while the rival struggled to maintain authority, Don Vito remained exactly where he had always been. Calm, composed, and fully aware that the most important battles are won long before the first shot is fired. What the rival did not yet understand was that the warning delivered by the survivor was only the beginning. The real consequences were still unfolding, quietly, patiently, and without mercy. The rival tried to regain control, but control is a fragile illusion once it cracks. Every decision he made after that night carried hesitation. Every order sounded less convincing than the one before. He had sent 15 men to erase a legend, and instead, he had strengthened it. Don Vito, meanwhile, did nothing that could be seen. And yet, everything shifted. Business deals that once flowed smoothly began to stall. Trusted intermediaries delayed responses. Meetings were postponed without explanation. No one openly defied the rival, but no one fully supported him either. Respect once lost does not announce its departure. It simply stops showing up. Don Vito understood that humiliation is more effective than destruction. Killing a man makes him a martyr. Leaving him alive, stripped of certainty, turns him into a warning. And the survivor was not the only messenger now. The streets themselves carried the lesson. Whispers spread, not rumors but conclusions. If Don Vito could neutralize 15 men without noise, what chance did anyone else have? The rival began to isolate himself, surrounding his world with guards and walls, believing proximity to violence meant safety. But Don Vito had never believed in walls. He believed in influence. Influence walks through doors no weapon can stop. In private, Don Vito reflected on the cost of betrayal. Not the cost to him, but the cost to the men who chose it. He knew that betrayal rarely comes from courage. It comes from impatience, the belief that shortcuts exist in a world governed by balance. He spoke quietly to his son, explaining that leadership is not about domination, but about restraint. That true authority is measured by how little force is needed to maintain order. The lesson was not theoretical. It was unfolding in real time. The rival, desperate to reassert power, considered retaliation. Loud, public, undeniable. But every option led back to the same fear. If Don Vito wanted him gone, he would already be gone. That realization poisoned every plan. The survivor watched from the sidelines, haunted by the knowledge that his life was no longer his own. He had delivered the warning, but warnings linger. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the calm expression on Don Vito's face. Not anger, not pride, but certainty. The kind of certainty that does not need to prove itself. Don Vito allowed time to do what violence could not. He understood that men reveal their weakness when left alone with their thoughts, and the rival's thoughts were now his enemy. As alliances quietly shifted and loyalties realigned, Don Vito prepared for the next phase. Not an attack, but a decision. Because power, when exercised correctly, is not reactive, it is deliberate. And the moment was approaching when the rival would be forced to confront the final truth. This conflict had never been about strength. It had always been about understanding who truly controlled the game. And soon, that understanding would arrive, whether the rival was ready for it or not. The rival's world continued to shrink. What once felt like authority now felt like isolation. Every room he entered seemed colder, every conversation shorter. Men nodded, but their eyes no longer followed him. Respect had quietly migrated elsewhere. Don Vito observed all of it from a distance. He did not rush the outcome. He believed that endings should feel inevitable, not forced. When a man collapses on his own, the lesson lasts longer. The rival finally requested a meeting. It was not framed as surrender. Pride would not allow that. It was presented as negotiation, as if the scales were still balanced. Don Vito agreed without hesitation, not because he needed the meeting, but because refusing it would deny the rival the final clarity he deserved. The meeting was arranged in daylight. No weapons on the table, no raised voices, just men who understood that the most dangerous conversations are the quiet ones. The rival spoke first, attempting confidence. He spoke of misunderstandings, of independent actors, of mistakes made without his knowledge. Don Vito listened patiently, his expression unchanged. He had heard these words before, spoken by many men who believed accountability was negotiable. When the rival finished, Don Vito remained silent for several moments. Silence in his hands was not emptiness, it was pressure. "You sent men," Don Vito finally said. "Not 15, not soldiers, just men." The simplicity of the statement stripped the rival of every defense he had prepared. Don Vito continued, explaining that betrayal does not begin with action, but with intention. The moment the rival allowed the idea to exist, the outcome became unavoidable. 14 men paid for following that idea. One lived to carry its weight. The rival tried to argue that power demands risk. Don Vito disagreed. "Power," he said, "demands responsibility. A leader does not gamble with loyalty. He protects it." The rival realized then that this meeting was not about forgiveness. It was about closure. Don Vito did not threaten him. He did not outline consequences. He did something far more unsettling. He removed him from consideration. The rival was no longer an enemy. He was no longer relevant. "You will continue," Don Vito said calmly, "but you will continue smaller." Those words landed heavier than any sentence of death. The rival left the meeting alive, intact, and diminished. His empire did not fall overnight. It eroded, piece by piece, opportunity by opportunity. Men followed success, and success now belonged elsewhere. Don Vito returned home unchanged. No celebration, no satisfaction, just the quiet understanding that order had been restored, not through force, but through principle. Yet one final element remained unresolved. The survivor, the man who carried the warning, had fulfilled his role. But roles in Don Vito's world are never accidental. And before the balance could fully settle, one last decision had to be made. A decision that would define not punishment, but legacy. The survivor was summoned one final time. He arrived expecting judgment, perhaps death, or at least exile. What he found instead was the same calm presence that had haunted him since the night he was spared. Don Vito Corleone sat quietly, as if nothing in the world had ever unsettled him. "You delivered the message," Don Vito said, "and you delivered it honestly." The man nodded, unsure whether gratitude or fear was appropriate. Don Vito explained that survival is never an accident. It is a responsibility. Being spared meant carrying a lesson, not escaping it. Don Vito offered him a choice. Not freedom. Freedom is an illusion in this world. But direction. He could disappear and live a small life, always looking over his shoulder, or he could remain close, serving as a reminder of what loyalty costs and what betrayal destroys. The survivor understood then that Don Vito's power was never about control through terror. It was about shaping outcomes without raising his hand. 14 men were erased so that countless others would never need to be. Don Vito reflected quietly on the nature of strength. Men who chase power, he believed, are always loud. Men who possess it rarely speak. Violence announces weakness. Restraint announces confidence. As time passed, the rival faded into irrelevance, not through destruction, but through neglect. History does not remember men who lose slowly. It remembers those who never lose at all. Don Vito's legacy endured because it was built on principles that could not be assassinated: honor, patience, family. In a world obsessed with dominance, he mastered restraint. In an era addicted to noise, he chose silence. The survivor became part of the story no one spoke about openly, a living reminder that betrayal does not end in chaos, but in understanding, and understanding, once delivered, cannot be taken back. In the end, Don Vito Corleone remained exactly what he had always been, not a symbol of fear, but a master of balance, a man who understood that true power does not demand obedience, it earns it, and those who forget that lesson are not punished loudly, they are simply removed from the future.